We have more survivors in the audience today. I'd like to start by introducing Terri Cook. Terri comes to us from Maryland. So they all flew in this morning. She is an aortic dissection type B and type A survivor. It is unique. It's unique to the fact that it's rare to have type B first. She is currently the director of fundraising for Aortic Hope. So if you saw the Aortic Hope materials out there, swag, as you will, and we talked a little bit about Aortic Hope earlier. She has held several successful events to support Aortic Hope and is a mom and wife and continues to work full-time after both dissections. Let's welcome Terri Cook.
Thank you, Noelle, for the introduction. I need to start by saying I just found out I needed to do this about 10 o'clock this morning. So please bear with me. This is my first time. I am going to be speaking in April, hopefully still in April in Baltimore. So this is a practice run, so you guys just be really nice. As Noelle said, I am not just an aortic dissection survivor. I am a two-time survivor. I was never happy being a B student. So fast forward 10 more years, and I got that A finally. Now I'll tell you what led up to that type B dissection, my type A dissection, and the recovery from both. They are different, and in my case, with different results and different recoveries. My type B dissection was in July of 2011. I had no knowledge that aortic disease even existed. It was a normal Saturday morning. My husband was at a bowling tournament, which he usually is almost every weekend, and it was just a normal day. My son was home, and I just felt this excruciating pain in my back between my shoulder blades. It felt like what I thought was the worst muscle spasm. No matter what I did, no matter where I sat, no matter where I laid, it just wouldn't go away. And nothing helped. A couple hours passed, nothing changed. I wasn't in shape, it didn't work out. So how in the world could it be a muscle spasm? When I finally realized it wasn't going away, I knew I needed to get it looked at. I looked at my son at the time, who was 7 years old, and said, "Mommy needs help. You need to call 911. His response is, "Are you serious?" I said, "I am serious. Call 911 now." So he did. I could hear him on the phone with the 911 operator answering all the questions. Now let me tell you how I became a type A student. As I said, I wasn't happy being a type B student. So in August of 2021, just a little over a year ago, 10 years after my first dissection, I became a type A dissection. It was a Sunday. I must love the weekends for this stuff. I don't know. It was a Sunday, and I had the most productive morning. My husband was at a bowling tournament again. And I finished unloading my Sam's Club order from the car. And remember, nobody takes up just one bag at a time. And I live on a second-floor condo. Once I did that, I dropped everything in the kitchen, and all of a sudden I felt this really weird pain. I felt this throbbing, my neck hurt, and I felt this throbbing in my ears. I couldn't figure out what it was. And I'm sure, like all of you, what did I do? I went to Dr. Google, because I knew it had to be muscular. Because now I work out 5 days. I try to work out 5 days a week. I try to eat better. So something had to be muscular. There was no way. I'd never even thought it would be another aortic dissection. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So what happened was I took some ibuprofen, and I had never been told that I'm not supposed to take ibuprofen, and I have had high blood pressure since I was 28, it was just a couple years ago. So I took that, and I took a nap, figuring that'll work. I woke up from the nap about 2 hours later, and the pain and the throbbing in my ears was still there. By that time, I knew that my husband was back in the state of Maryland because he was in Rhode Island, and I waited. It's about 8 o'clock at night, and I called him, and I said, "Something's not right. I need to get this checked out." So I'm going to Patient First. I don't know if you have Patient First here, but it's just one of our local clinics that anyone can go to. Went there. They ordered an x-ray. The doctor really wasn't sure what was going on. Ordered the x-ray, and he looked at me, he said, "I see something in your chest in the x-ray. I'm not sure what it is. I think you should go to the ER. We can provide transportation for you, No, that's okay. Being Miss Independent, I drove myself to the ER. So now that I set my stage for both dissections, let me share the hospital story for the first dissection in 2011. I arrived at the hospital, and I must be honest with you, I really don't remember much. I was in so much pain that I just remember having a CAT scan and speaking with the doctor. He explained in layman terms what had happened. My blood pressure was very high, and then I was sent to the ICU where I stayed for a few days. The nursing staff in the ICU was wonderful. They took care of me. They also heard the story that my 7-year-old had called 911. And as you both probably know, in the ICU, they don't let minors in. But the nurses made an exception so that he could see mommy was really okay. And then the B story didn't end. My primary care physician at the time sent me to Johns Hopkins. Luckily, we were very fortunate that in Maryland we have Johns Hopkins and we have University of Maryland. And I went to Johns Hopkins and I received care there. I had multiple MRIs over a period of about 9 months. At that 9-month mark, an aneurysm appeared. So on my 10th wedding anniversary, March 14th, 2012, I had a thoracic endovascular aneurysm repair at Johns Hopkins. Now, on to my more recent experience, my type A dissection. This time, I was alert enough to comprehend what was happening. Of course, Miss Independent, I drove myself. I'm sure all of you know the waiting game that you have in the ER. And being the later part of the pandemic, it was much worse. After it was ruled out that I was not having a heart attack, I was sent to the ER waiting room, where I sat for approximately 4 hours. By that time, it was past midnight. A physician came to see me, and during our conversation, she came out to the lobby to talk to me, and let's go in this room, we'll talk, and she was going through my medical history, and she literally bent down to see if I had swelling and edema in my ankles, and something just burst in my back. And I started screaming, and I couldn't sit still, and I was up and I was down, and she's like, I really think you should sit down, and immediately they called in a gurney, they got me in. And I remember specifically, because at that point, I had no idea what it was. I thought I was dying, which I probably was. But I remember her saying, whoever is in CAT scan, she has to go first. Apparently, she knew what was going on. So they put me in CAT scan. By that time, I was able to call my husband, and he came up to the hospital. And we all have, I think everybody now has patient portals where you can log in and look at your results and test results. My husband and I knew it was a dissection before the doctor even came back into the room because I logged into my patient portal. You know, you get text messages, you get emails, you've got your phone, you know you got a result. We were stunned. We couldn't believe it was another dissection. Now, let me remind you that we were in the latter part of the pandemic. The hospitals were overrun with COVID cases. Therefore, she called 5 different hospitals in the Maryland, DC, Pennsylvania, Delaware region. Everybody rejected me. They couldn't take it because they were overrun with COVID cases. Luckily, somebody, I guess they called the doctor that was on call, and I was able to go to University of Maryland. And I'm not sure if you're familiar, but shock trauma is at University of Maryland, so they kind of always have beds available because of shock trauma. I did not go for helicopter. I didn't get all that fancy stuff. I just went in an ambulance. And I had open heart surgery. Of course, I was shocked. I kept asking them if there was another way they could do this because I didn't know what open heart surgery was. Now, let's discuss the recovery. To keep the flow of my story going, please don't judge me. Looking back on the recovery from my aneurysm repair, that was a piece of cake. I was basically keep my blood pressure low, follow up with MRAs, eat healthy, and start an exercise plan. Poof. After a few weeks, I was back to work and I had a plan. My recovery from the type A dissection was the flip side of the coin from my earlier experience. I was determined to leave the hospital without a walker because my son would have never let me live that down. He would have thought I was older than I really am. And I didn't know whether I was going to live, if I did live, how long was I going to live? Was I going to see my son grow up? Was I going to grow old with my husband? I get home, more issues appear, medications are wrong, female issues, back and forth to the hospital, had to have the cardiovert restart my heart. They had to do it twice. And finally, a month after I came home from the hospital, things started to calm down. My true road to recovery had started. Another silent killer is mental health. At this time, I realized that my mental health was suffering and impacting my family. 2 months after having my open heart surgery, feeling depressed, worrying more and more each day about life, a friend suggested that I reach out to a friend of hers. Little side note, it was Karen. And that's when I found Aortic Hope. Through Aortic Hope, I met the most incredible people that have or are having similar experiences. The Aortic Hope community embraces me, educates me, and supports me. And now I support the community being on the board of Aortic Hope. The other thing is, in addition, my father passed away last March. While he was in the hospital and they were doing all kinds of tests trying to find out what was going on with him, if they could reverse anything, if they could help him, they discovered he had two undiagnosed aortic dissections. All along, I thought this was something for my mom, maybe, but the doctors just said, oh, it's just your high blood pressure. No, it was hereditary. So my son has already been checked. My niece and nephew are going to be checked. You can see genetics play a huge part in this. There was no reason, like I said, that the doctors could figure this out. Now let's go back to the beginning. I'm alive today because of that initial call to 911 made by my then 7-year-old son. I'm beside myself with love and gratitude, and I try to remember all of this when I look at the now 19-and-a-half-year-old. Let's not forget the 911 operator who was so well trained to work with a child of that age. Also, kudos to the EMTs that knew they had to secure the safety of my son, who stayed with my neighbor until my husband was able to get him. Thank you to the ER physician who recognized the signs of a type A dissection and ordered that initial CAT scan. And the biggest thanks, she said I was going to do this, Karen. The biggest thanks to my best friend of 23 years, my husband, for his love, care, support, and patience. And thank you for Rock from the Heart for allowing me to do this today.